Just trying to record.
I'm talking just to test my microphone, to see if it works.
Good.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, I've got the questions here, Max, that I'm asking for you. Let's check.
Okay, so thank you everybody who's joining us online. And our two speakers are just preparing themselves. Just for the record, this talk will be recorded. So we normally turn it off at Q&A and let it get a bit spicy, but I'll leave that to the speakers if they want to stop recording at question time. I'm going to stop sharing this screen here so we can all see each other. And thank you so much, Sander, for joining us from your part of the world. Yin, Harry. Dan's joining us from Australia. We have people from the Netherlands, Norway, UK, and of course Canada, which is lovely. Okay, well, I'm going to start the formal talk now, and we have two marvelous speakers tonight. So the SHRED Network stands for Skating, Sustainability, Health Research and Environmental Design. And part of the network is to do monthly seminars for free. And the reason we did this was originally we were seeing people going to international conferences, and we were students at the time and we just couldn't afford to go, and our institutions couldn't afford to send us. So we thought we would approach somebody like Harry Meadley, for instance, and in San Diego, I also met Ben Dixon and others, and we missed his talk on a parallel session. So Harry kindly did his talk as our very first inaugural one. And we thought for people that are okay to share some of their presentations more broadly, we could record them, and it was just a lot more accessible for a lot of people to see. So thank you for that, Harry, being our very first SHRED speaker. And yeah, we take into account that there are lots of different impacts that we have on the environment, lots of different ways that sustainability can be approached in terms of cultural sustainability as well as environmental sustainability. And we've recently had talks by people from the BMX world, and we're increasingly also focusing on different kind of angles on SHRED. So we are also open to talking to people that do architectural studies from roller skating, for instance. The two speakers tonight are Max Boutin and Ben Dixon. They are enormously talented people with enormously beautiful bios. So I won't read it all, but just to try and summarize, if that's possible for such accomplished people, is Ben Dixon is a sound artist and anthropologist based in Edinburgh. Ben's practice inquiries into the sound of skateboarding from an acoustemological perspective, exploring skate sound as a way of learning and knowing the built environment. His approach is grounded in analog sound recordings and editing techniques borrowed from early electroacoustic music. In the vein of musique, concrète, Ben uses field recordings made at skate spaces as raw material for his works. Ben, as far as our last bio that I have for you, Ben, you're a PhD candidate in art practice and learning at Goldsmiths, University of London, and a landscape and wellbeing Master of Science tutor at the University of Edinburgh. And your work has been featured on things like BBC Radio and screened at the Stoke Sessions and played at the Vladimir Film Festival as part of a panel's discussion on skateboarding and the Anthropocene, which I believe Tom Critchley might have been convening that as well. Max Boutin is a multidisciplinary artist-researcher based in Montreal, Canada. His doctoral thesis, he developed a texturological approach to skateboarding, in which the skateboard is conceived as both a haptic interface and an instrument for sound production, engaging with rhythms and textures of the urban environment. This led to the creation of texturology vibratoire, a visual and sonic haptic installation. His research is supported by Hexagram, an international network for research created based in Montreal, and the Fonds de Recherche de Quebec, Société et Culture, which funded both his PhD and his current postdoctoral research in skate sound composition, conducted at the Laboratoire Formes Ondes LFO within the Faculty of Music at the University of Montreal. His research creation practice is situated within the art skate movement, recently mapped through his research and the skate studies. He is the co-author of the Sonic Spectrums of Skateboarding, From Polarity to Plurality, and The Skater's Ear, A Sensuous Complexity of Skateboarding Sound, co-written with Ben Glennie and Paul O'Connor. His work has been presented at the Agora de Cours des Sciences in Montreal, Ars Electronica in Linz, Austria, and recently at the Festival International de Musique Actuelle de Victoriaville in Victoriaville, Canada. Okay, I'm now going to hand over firstly to Ben Dixon, who's now going to move us forward to the next stage of this presentation. Thank you, Ben.
Hi, folks. Thanks, Indy, and thanks to all the shredders for having us today. Max and I have met virtually in advance of this talk, so it was really nice to meet Max and finally chat about his work. I was kind of introduced to Max through, I think through Brian Glennie when he found out I was doing work on skate sound. And I remember a fantastic interaction I had with Max, which I think shows his insight and generosity, which is I was on a train riding back. I might have been doing Edinburgh to London. And I remember I'd sent Max some pictures of my research practice as part of his PhD mapping of skate art practice. And he dropped me a message and he was like, "Hey, I want to include you in my thesis, and I've written a little summary of your work, and I would love to sort of hear your thoughts on it." And he sent it over, and Max, I have to hand it to you. You read more into my work than I even realized that I was doing at the time. So I got the message through, and I was like, Max, you can just write my PhD for me. Like you've read into this further than I have already. So yeah, really stoked to get to the opportunity to have this chat and to find out a little bit more about texturologies. As I say, Max and I met before the talk, so we've sort of come up with a little list of questions for one another, but we've not fully sort of hashed everything out. Yeah, I'll jump straight in with the first question. So I believe Max has some slides, so feel free to share them if you need to. So firstly, I just want to hear a little bit about Max's background, artistically, academically, personally. What's your background, Max, and how did you end up in this place?
Thank you, Ben. Thank you very much for your nice introduction. And yeah, I'll jump right into it. Exactly, I have slides, and it will look a bit like an academic presentation, but I hope you'll not get bored. But I have plenty of content to try not to. So I just need to share my screen first before with the audio and for the videos. Okay. The only thing is that I don't see your I don't know how to do that, but I don't see your faces anymore. So okay, all right. Okay. Do you see my screen?
Yeah, we got it.
Okay, thank you very much. So before starting my PhD, I did my bachelor's and master's at École des Beaux-Arts de Montpellier in the south of France. It's called MoCo Contemporary. In 2008, during a video art retrospective exhibition that was presented in my town, I had the chance to experience Dance Graham's installation, Present, Conscience, and Past, which had a major effect on my artistic devenir. And I developed an installation and video-based artistic practice focused on the lived experience, in which I was looking for, and I continue to seek to transpose the poetics of movement that I perceive around me. So, for example, this is a texturology, Turritopsis nutricula, and it's an upside-down handmade parachute named after a small jellyfish, which is capable of reversing its aging process and making itself nearly immortal. This is the Quake video installation that inverts the point of view between the space of capture and the space of projection. And in this work, the public look at the work up above their head and see this trampolinist also filmed from above, but seen in the other way, and is disappearing in the fabric of the trampoline. And this sculptural installation is a 3 meters high and long slide, cut in half and separated in space. And this work is defined by a gesture of fragmentation, punctuation of elements, and spatial reconfiguration, like in a skate line or in a musical score. And it was at first inspired by linear video editing. And so these 3 works were part of my master degrees exhibition in June 2013.
There we go. I'm unmuted once more. Lovely, thanks, Max. So next up, I suppose we're coming to the link towards skateboarding. So when did you start skateboarding, and what was your motivation to start at first?
So like many kids from my generation, I guess, everything started between Tony Hawk Pro Skater, the game, and watching skaters of my town. I was 11 then. I was living in a small village in the countryside of Lyon, the same Lyon as Lyon 25. I learned the basics. Then I quickly moved to Nice in the south of France, the French Riviera. I really started to skate there and met friends and discovered different kinds of spots. Then in my life, my parents divorced, and like many skaters, skateboarding and friends were a kind of a new family. I've skated a lot until my 20s. Stopped for a while, got back to it again and again, and then I reactivated my skate practice with my art practice, which was and is a good combo to me.
Nice. I think we're quite similar in that Tony Hawk games were central to my early skating practice as well, as I'm sure there were for many other people. Lovely. So then leading on from that, then where does this interest in skate sounds come from? Where does the sound of skateboarding come into that?
So I would lie to you if I were telling you that in my teenage years, I was obsessed with skate sounds. In fact, this interest came very late, even not at the beginning of my PhD. And it kind of grew in time like a good wine, I guess. But I can say something quite particular, because our home spot in Nice had something both aggressive and very pleasant. It's the former Place Masséna, which don't exist in this state anymore. It looked like this. It was kind of a fountain with a circular drain in the middle, 6-7 stairs, and 3 blocks on both sides. And nice. And it had this special rattling sound that I will never forget. And a sound that you can feel in your feet, your legs, and that could resonate in your ears. So this is a video of Vince Eskenazi from the days.
That looks like such a good spot. My current spot is Bristow Square, which has a similarly rattly sort of tiled floor. So it's really nice to see. And then the curved ledges around the edge as well.
That's beautiful.
Amazing. Let's see. So then, so we're talking about sort of practice research here. So we've got a bit of a blend of sort of creation and sort of academic research. So I wanted to find out more about, for you, because I think it differs for a lot of people, how are practice and theory related in your work?
I'll start with that. Here is, to me, a great example of what theory and art practice can do. This is La Conjonction Interdite. In English, it's have been translated. It's The Forbidden Conjunction. It's by a French artist, skater, Raphaël Zarka. His artistic career at first is motivated by his skateboarding experience and how it has shaped his relation to space and to the city. And he wrote this book. It's an essay about what skateboarding is in terms of play in a sociological point of view. And so this book gave me the will to challenge myself and start my research creation PhD. Oh, and I will mention research creation. This is another term for practice-based research. This is the way we say it in Quebec. I would say that theory and practice is all about communicating vessels. Everything starts with the question, or maybe with an intuition, in my case, and it's transformed into a question that leads to experimentation. And this question leads to research that what really exists and lead you to find your own way to go beyond and through art, which helps to go beyond questions more theoretically. And at the end, it ends with ideas, lacks, maybe frustration, more question, but with a story to tell, a research creation story. So to me, yeah, practice and theory as an artist researcher, and like maybe any artist, in fact, is really intertwined. And I think what will come next will be a good example as well.
Good. So in that case, moving on to talk a little bit more specifically about your work in relation to skate sound, what is texturology?
What is texturology? So I'm not going to talk about skate sound right now, but I will come to that. So this is the core of my work. First, I would say that texturology is an artistic method and my research object, exploring the ground texture through skateboarding by art practice. And my project is inspired by two things at first: experiential work and Raphaël Zarka's book and artworks. That's what gave me the will to start. And those two interests led me to two questions. So if Raphaël Zarka has an artistic practice inspired by skateboarding, primarily sculptural, and mine is experiential, also inspired by skateboarding, could I transpose the experience of skateboarding into art? And could the act of skateboarding itself become an artistic act? So to materialize this reflection, I equipped a skateboard with an action camera at first in order to film the act of skateboarding as close as possible to the ground. And the results showed real artistic potential to me. I could see the city differently, and I could feel it through the visual and sonic vibrations of the skate wheels on urban texture. And that's what greatly led me toward my main research question: how can the vibratory and textural experience of urban skateboarding may be tangible through a video installation artwork? And so here I translated tangible, but in French I said faire vivre, which means make yourself live the experience, but I didn't know how to translate that with the same flavor. So make be tangible. And this main question has led me to transdisciplinary research. It's rooted first in the visual and media art, since this is where I come from and where I do research, so that's research creation. And as we will see, it also belongs to the field of skate arts. And to answer this question through practice, I used the heuristic methodology, which served the production of knowledge through experimentation and artistic discovery, and the reflexive approach to skateboarding in the city with a retroaction thinking that is necessary for any art production, in my opinion. And to respond on the theoretical level, my thesis draws on elements of sensory anthropology, amongst other things, but works on visual perception and haptics and sensoriality of skateboarding. And this sensory perspective allowed me to develop a texturological approach, which is a practical and theoretical consideration of ground textures and patterns, and the geohaptic approach, which is the tactile knowledge of territory through the experience of skateboarding and skate sounds. So this research can be conceived as maybe an experimental geography project conducted with the skate cam I developed, and a kind of a ritualistic data collection called action cam praxis. So, for example, this is the skate cam I used for texturologie vibratoire, my PhD installation that I will talk afterward. It's a skateboard equipped with an action camera mounted on a custom-made GoPro fixture, which is designed after many iterations of prototyping to be vibration-proof. The action cam praxis is a kind of a texturological ritual in which I film the vibratory sequences with the skate cam. I take photograph of the texture and pattern holding the skate cam like a camera pole, film steady shots with a second camera, and then I realize embossings of the ground texture by skateboarding over a sheet of paper for the texturology prints series. So this is the art core of my research creation project. It's my PhD exhibition Texturologies, which I presented in which I presented my installation Texturologie Vibratoire. So as Indy said, it's a visual, sonic, and haptic artwork, which offers a sensory transposition on rolling on a skateboard across textured surfaces of the city. The left screen of the installation is a concrete bank made of cement boards on which we can see the skate cam sequences. So here's a bigger demo. And the right screen of the installation embodies the skater's eye, giving the geographical context of the other screen that we just saw and fitting the urban soundscape to the exhibition space. And in the middle of those two screens is the haptic model setting the ideal point to experience the installation. It diffuses the sound of the skates in motion, and it is a sensory interface that allows the public to feel the vibration of the skate cam. Yeah, it's very powerful. And finally, around the space were installed 6 embossings from the Texturology prints series. So what we see here is simply a sheet of paper on which I rolled over and over and over, imprinting the ground's texture into the paper. They are presented on small microphone stands, and a beam of light reveals the texture by the flickering of the skate the skate cam's vibration in real time. So it's a synchronism installation. A few pictures of the installation. And I also developed a mobile iteration for an exhibition at Ars Electronica in 2023. And the haptic module here is more of a schematic skateboard in which are plugged directly the headphones. And this version allows a quick immersion into the urban sensorium, the skate sounds, and it can be perceived kind of an artistic skate simulation, if I may say. And it reveals the stance of the public, which I know will interest some researchers. And the installation, like Indy said, was also recently presented at FIMAV, which is the Festival International de Musique Actuelle de Victoriaville in May 2025. And there was also a print there, but a concrete skate texturology as well, which is a sculpture of a skateboard deck made entirely of concrete. And here it is presented on a microphone boom, and the light also flickers in synchronism with the haptic module.
That's so cool, Max. I've not seen the transportable version yet, and that was really cool to see. It reminded me of, like, I'm pretty sure I had like a controller for the PS2 that was like a skateboard shape that was designed for playing like different skate games.
You had this one?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. It made me think of that because I can't remember if that had like haptic feedback, but it would be interesting to you could maybe circuit bend some of those old controllers, and yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So then let's see, I've got a question here about the background of texturology itself. So like, where does texturology come from? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you very much. Yeah, where does texturology come from? Because it's such a specific name that it has to come from somewhere. In fact, I first encountered the notion of texturology through Elie During's article on the work of Raphaël Zarka, an article called Le skateboard fait penser. In this text, During invites us to look at the city through the eyes of the skateboarder, who, according to him, possesses a molecular perception of urban texture and is attentive to the micro properties of surfaces and pavement. And he supports this idea with a footnote, citing Michel de Certeau, who, and I quote, imagined a kind of texturology capable of embracing the city without overlooking it or keeping it at a distance. In other words, possibly a way of understanding urban territory by practicing it from close proximity. This would suggest that the skater is gifted with a texturological perception of space. And this notion of texturology, which de Certeau mentions in L'invention du quotidien, which is the practice of everyday life, is the aerial view of the city that moves and transforms into a texturology. And this texturology, in turn, refers back to the texturology series of the French painter Jean Dubuffet. Jean Dubuffet's period from 1957 to 1960 is literally entitled La Célébration des Sols, Soils Celebration. With texturology, he reveals the visual quality of what appears to him, and I quote, as common, banal, and having nothing exceptional. He invites us to undertake contemplative experience of the ground. And from this emerged a fascinating body of work whose titles evoke variations of texture, material, color, such as Nuancement au sol that we see here, or La physique du sol, which is beautiful. but also collage made from the texturologist that he cut off his canvas. This one is topography, miette et pavage. I think it's one of my favorites. I really like it. It means topography, scrambles, and paving. And in this way, he worked through different modes of creation, like oil pen, collage, material paste, ink, but also lithography, which is a kind of embossing with ink. And I came across his work quite long after my early experimentation. And this encounter made me realize that I might be extending the artistic concept of texturology. In fact, Jean Dubuffet, he transposed the aesthetic and morphology of the ground that he observed during his walks in Provence and Paris through different traditional mediums in 2 dimensions. But in my case, it's the textural experience of skateboarding that I transposed through a multimodal capture process with my skate cam. And like Dubuffet, this transposition of texture unfolds in multiple forms, like multimedia installation, embossing, photography, sculpture. So my texturological eye is quite similar with Dubuffet, but my approach is different. It is in visual and media art, like I said before. It's in a different era, completely different. I do this in research creation, and it also refers to skate studies, and it belongs to the skate arts movement that I will talk later. And finally, my research creation stance is therefore an articulation between the texturological eye and the skateboarder's eye on urban space. So this is where texturology comes from.
Good. Okay, I think that's going to lead us into this with a bit more detail. So texturology is this method, an artistic method, to explore and transpose the haptic and visual experience of the ground. In your case, this is through skateboarding. But then could you add to that and tell us more about the relation between texturology and skate sound? Because so far we've explored sort of haptic and visual. So I want to hear why sound comes into it.
Of course. First of all, I think this part of my research would not have been the same if I did not came across 2 famous researcher skaters. And I will take today the good opportunity to send a big thank you to Brian Glennie and Paul O'Connor, because they recognize in this research creation project a catalyst for reflection on the sonic dimensions of skateboarding. And this had led us to the production of the 2 papers, the sonic spectrums of skateboarding from polarity to plurality, in which, among other things, we consider texturology as a potential tool for mediation that could help the public to appreciate the value of skate sounds and the skater's ear, a sensory complexity of skateboarding sounds, which is addressing how skate sounds are important to the skater experience between affects and the knowledge they can provide. And these encounters led me to think of the skateboard as an instrument. And in my thesis, I refer to skateboarding as a haptic interface, an instrument of sound production that is intrinsic with the geohaptic experience of skateboarding. Before going directly to skate sound, I'll tell you about geohaptic. This is an artwork by Julien Paccard, a French artist based in Berlin. I love his work. It's awesome. You'll find plenty of it in my thesis. This one is called Traces 03 ICC, and it reflects the idea of geohaptic. So the skateboarder knows the city in a unique way. They know it through the tactile exploration of its surfaces, through direct contact with its materiality, like pavement, pavings, patterns, textures. This is what I've called the skater's haptic knowledge, drawing on Mark Peterson's work in haptic geographies. The skater's haptic knowledge operates through constant intersensory collaboration of somatic apparatus like kinesthesia, which is the sense of movement, the proprioception, the felt muscular position, the vestibular system related to balance, and more broadly, the nervous and muscular system, and of course, vision and hearing. The skater haptic knowledge developed through the vibratory experience of surface properties, what geographer Paul Rodeway calls the haptic experience. And this haptic experience varies according to spots, each of which possesses its own singular arrangement and texture. This is what I've called the vibratory identity of spots. And the association of this haptic experience across different vibratory identities of urban spaces constitute what I've defined as the geohaptic experience. Geohaptic is then a sensory approach to territory grounded in the tactile and vibratory experience of its surface lived in the first person. So through texturology, the skater develops a sensory knowledge of the city by means of geohaptics, and as we shall see, also reveals its rhythmic and sonic potential. So as sociologist Marc Touchet already noted in 1998, the skater, and it's maybe a bad translation, he leaps, slides, jumps, grinds, slalom, crashes, rolls, skids, crepes, snaps, and rasps across various surfaces, each of which has its own sonic characteristics. And according to this definition, skateboarding is therefore a performative and sonic practice of space. And I explained this in my thesis through analogies that I borrowed from musical creation and sound art. First of all, the skateboard can be compared to as an instrument. It has a wooden body, like a violin. It has metal mechanical parts, sorry. It's played with the feet, like a drum pedal, and it can sound out of tune if it's damaged. And like a piano, it can be tuned with a key, the skate tool. Next, the skateboarder is like the diamond needle of a turntable rolling over the urban texture. They reveal a hidden sonority by following an invisible line, which is punctuated by events like a music score. As Yann Borden explains, which is a drawing of on Henri Lefebvre's rhythm analysis, this performativity varies according to different rhythms, such as the performativity of skateboarding itself, like the flows of traffic, urban patterns, like we see here at Peel Park in Montreal, the rhythms of practice in terms of frequency, or even skateboarding as a counter rhythm. And finally, there is the molecular rhythm I have identified after during, which is what of an inner trembling through the haptic experience of skateboarding, and it's kind of a somatic texture. The excerpt I'm going to show you will sum up my view of skateboarding as a sonic and performative practice of space.
That's so good. I love seeing you run along like a filmer, but just with the boom mic next to the skater. So good. Amazing. And also that diamond needle metaphor is just so, yeah, so perfect. Lovely. Okay, thanks so much, Max, for sharing things about your work. One thing that I noticed when I was having a glance through your thesis, which you kindly sent me, is that there's just a really comprehensive exploration of the sort of, I called it the skate art scene, but I think you have another term for it. And I wondered if you could just share some highlights, because you're someone who really has their ear to the ground in terms of what's going on in the skate art world. So go for it.
Thank you, Ben. And yeah, it's a beginning. So I know that I don't have included every art skate related work, and it's the base of what I will continue. I think I've paved the foundation of this large project. I want to keep digging, in fact. So it's the cartography of skate arts practices. Skate art is maybe a movement in which artworks are conceptualized and created through a contemporary artistic approach that engages with the issues and context of skateboarding, like sound arts, performing arts, and digital arts, but for skateboarding and art. So skate arts should not be confused with skate art without an S, which is a form of artistic expression that uses the skateboard deck as its support, as you know it. But some skate art could be definitely be featured in the skate arts. In my thesis, I talked about art skate, but I'm now thinking afterward that maybe skate arts with an S is maybe more efficient and more inclusive, and this is something I would like to talk with you afterwards. There is around 40 artists and more than 100 works for now. I'll separated them in kind of families, so I'll go through the different kinds. With sculptural approaches, there are artists whose practices are inspired by scalp sculpture, like Louis Sawowski, who creates, for example, concrete skate shoes, skateboards, or skate wheels made of stones. It's beautiful. There is also practices in which sculptural works are meant to be skated, such as Skateboarders versus Minimalism by the artist Sean Gladwell, which I think is present here today. We invited here professional skateboarders to perform on replicas of minimalist sculptures. I have given also significant attention to Rafael Zarca, whose artistic practice is deeply rooted in skateboarding and who has built a very rich body of work. For example, his paving spaces are modular sculptures whose forms and arrangement are determined in collaboration with the skateboarders who will ride on them. Or here with the Riding Modern Art, which consists of a series of photographs of skaters that are performing skateboards on public artworks. And precisely, some artists focus especially on the spots as the subject for the art or the art series, as we see in Monuments series by French artist Pierre Descamps, which reflects on a skateboarder's eye. Like a simple handrail, a staircase, a hubba can ultimately become very and highly aesthetic, even sublime. And as we saw earlier, the skateboard can be conceived as a sound producing instrument, here equipped with sensor, as several artists have explored, including Simon Morris, maybe one of the first, in his performance Songlines, where the movement of the skateboard generate sonic atmospheres. So these were experimentation for a performance he did in 2006. Sound or musical composition can be associated with the performative practice of skateboarding. So some projects are interpreted works, such as Discord by composer skater Sam Perkin, who wrote a musical piece for a skateboard, a violin, a modular sculpture, and skateboarders. Meanwhile, sound production can also be directly integrated into the performance, as we see in Something in Between performance by Sergei Vutuk. And skate sounds can be the raw material for installation and or performative pieces, as we will see in Ben Dixon's presentation.
And we perform with it. Noise to the public, but to us, it's the condition of skateboarding.
Here, the sound is increased, boost to the urban environment. No other species that moves in the way that the skateboarder does, produces the sounds that the skateboarder does, or interacts with the city in the way that the skateboarder does.
Skateboarding as an instrument
of wood. It has a metal. You tune it with a key,
And I have to skip, sorry, but I'll keep looking at it. The final branch of skate arts is the geohaptic practices. They echo the notion of dérive in skateboarding and the tactile knowledge of urban geography. And the best example is the work Ground Zero by Julien Paccard, who filmed skateboarders on specific types of texture and composed soundscapes inspired by each materiality. And I think I will finish on this because my time is largely up. And we'll hear about Ben just afterward. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, Max. Round of applause. That was so nice. And yeah, thanks for sharing all of that media on sort of different skate art stuff that's going on. It's so nice to see that all sort of archived in one place.
That's great pleasure. Just I have a problem. I haven't seen any faces around. I don't know where they have gone. So I don't see it. I don't see you, Ben. Sorry.
That's all right. You can keep searching around for me. So the idea is that Max and I are going to swap roles now, and Max is going to ask me some questions about my skate art practice as soon as he finds our lovely faces on his screen somewhere.
Anyone knows? Please help someone. There's no one around.
I think if you stop sharing your
Oh yeah, I'm still sharing. Okay.
you see us now? Sort of?
Yes.
Okay.
You're back.
And for Ben, are you happy to just have our faces looking at you for your next session?
Let's do it.
Thank you, Max. Thank you for a wonderful talk. And now we are going to switch around, which is great.
Thank you very much again for all your attention, and thank you, Ben, for your questions. And yeah, it's very nice to have it from you. So I'll return the question that we prepared earlier. So Ben, what is your background?
Thanks, Max. So I'm from Northumberland, so reasonably rural upbringing for anyone who's familiar with the geography of the UK, up in the northeast of England. I moved off to study philosophy and anthropology at the University of Manchester, and I sort of got introduced to anthropology through that. I warmed to anthropology because there's a quote from Tim Ingold that says that anthropology is philosophy with the people in, and that really sort of stuck with me. So I found myself like gravitating towards anthropology, and ended up going out to study anthropology at Aarhus University in Denmark, where I did my MA thesis, and I did 6 months of fieldwork where I was exploring the phenomenon of highlining. So slackline highlining, where people rig slacklines up in the mountains. So yeah, I was interested in people's sort of motivations to participate in so-called extreme sports. And then once my master's was all wrapped up, I sort of became interested in finding a way to combine skateboarding and academia. And I started my PhD at Goldsmiths with Esther Sayers as my supervisor. So started researching skateboarding and sound down there. And then I've recently moved up to Edinburgh. Well, I say recently, it's been about 2 years now. It feels recent. But yeah, so I'm up in Edinburgh now. I do a bit of work with the university, and I'm writing up my PhD.
And yeah, thank you. And when did you start skating, and what made you start at first?
Yeah, so yeah, I think similar era to you, because as I say, the Tony Hawk games were a big inspiration. So I think, I don't know for sure, but I think I started skating when I was like roughly 8 to 10-ish. So this would have been like early 2000s, because my dad was really into, oh yeah, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, best one. I had it on the PS2, and I was obsessed with it. And actually over lockdown, my brother contacted me and he was like, told me that he just keeps completing Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3. That was what got him through lockdown, was just like replaying and completing Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. So yeah, so I got into it quite early because my dad used to skate. He was into punk music and all the sort of DIY scene and stuff. So I was quite lucky in that regard. And I met a bunch of friends in my village through skateboarding who I'm still friends with to this day, and we still go on skate trips together. So it's been a huge part of my life. And yeah, it just sort of, it's pervaded all the way through. And it's brought me here to today.
Yeah, Tony Hawk's, all the series for me, it was the Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 and 1. I just keep looping it, playing that. You know, you emulate what you do in the game. I'm gonna try that, but you know, it's not the same. Anyway, where is your interest on skate sound coming from? Did you get any interest when you were little or younger, or how did it comes to you?
Yeah, so again, similarly to you, Max, I was not a sound person right up until I started exploring sound in skateboarding. And I feel quite lucky in that regard, because I got to explore a lot of things with a sense of like novelty and excitement, right? So I had this background in ethnography through the anthropology that I'd been doing in Denmark. The type of ethnography that I was doing was sort of very sensory and embodied. It was based around using your own body as a research tool. And I had some interest in visual anthropology through my time at Manchester and also my time in Denmark. But with skateboarding, I already had that sort of inside knowledge that you might look for if you were doing an ethnography of a subculture where you were interested in doing a sort of embodied apprenticeship alongside them to learn about their movement practice. So I kind of needed something that was going to leave me once removed again from skateboarding and give me a bit of a lens to come outside of it and explore it. And my co-supervisor is Chris Wright, who's also a visual anthropologist, and he's very knowledgeable about sound and sound art. And he also happens to be a skater. And he recommended that I start going out and recording, making field recordings at skate spaces, basically. So yeah, as I say, I kind of arrived to it with no knowledge, no skills, and I was a little bit skeptical. I didn't feel like sound was a particularly central part to my experience of skateboarding. But I have to say that it has sort of grown on me as I've started to, well, particularly through working with analog recording technologies. But essentially, I think the interesting things about sound when it comes to skateboarding is that it's simultaneously sensory and political, right? So it makes up a huge part of the actual embodied experience of skateboarding. But it's also at the center of a lot of sort of contested issues around around spatial politics, where we are thinking about who has the right to access space, who has the right to use space in certain ways. Sound can often be found at the core of those sort of issues of governance.
Yeah, and I would add that, you know, the fact that you were not a sound artist or a sound person, that give you the I would say naiveness of like the sound medium, and that's give you I think a best card than someone that is already in sound, because you have like a fresh brain to start with in this kind of field. Thank you, Ben. Thank you very much. What's your current practice, research, and how did you arrive at it?
Yeah, so this is a fun one. So as you can see, I'm still in the write-up phase. So as opposed to Max, who's got everything reasonably wrapped up, I'm still sort of working my way through understanding what it is that I've been doing with my skate sound practice. I mean, I can start by saying that essentially my practice as a whole is exploring musique concrète involving the sounds and materials of skateboarding. So that's both sort of, let's see, experimenting with the affordances of analog recording technologies for recording and both playing back skate sound and manipulating it in different ways. So that's kind of one element of it. And then there's also the case of composing with skate sound. So using skate sound as the raw material for sort of musical compositions. And I've played around with creating these through both digital and analog sort of technologies. That process involves a number of steps. So there's firstly the actual active field recording, which I found has been very productive to the research process in terms of initiating conversations with skateboarders about the relevance of the sound for them. So the practice kind of opens windows to moments of conversation through recording. So I'll go along to a spot quite similar to the video you saw of Max. I'll start running alongside people and trying to record them skateboarding, record the sound of them skateboarding. And then through that kind of filmer approach, I end up in all these discussions with skaters about the meaning of skate sound for them, about the relevance of skate sound for them. There's also the creation of the work. So when it comes to creating the sculptures, there's the process of simultaneously sort of theorizing and reflecting on the things that you've been researching whilst doing something physical and embodied, which I think is like, I mean, that's been the really radical change for me through my PhD, is that a lot of my kind of write-up or kind of reflection on skateboarding practice has happened in a studio space, which has been like super productive because there's just stuff everywhere. There's materials, there's the actual physical analog tape that contains the sound of skateboarding in it, and you can manipulate it and change it in different ways. So that's been a really fruitful way of moving back and forth between practice and theory for me. So yeah, the current practice is the practice of exploring sort of musique concrète and skate sound and how those two things come together. The way that I got there is like I took a few turns along the way. So I started trying to record things just on my phone, and then sort of playing around with editing and making soundscapes on my laptop. I did some initial experiments with like binaural recording as well, where you wear microphones in your ears and it kind of gives you a spatial sound experience. But I basically found that I just found working on a laptop with sound just completely unbearable. So I didn't make a lot of progress with playing around with skate sound because it didn't feel playful to me to be working on a laptop. So I ended up picking up a few old sort of secondhand tape recorders, and I just found that they had a real resonance with skateboarding practice. So they're cheap, they're hackable, they've got lots of different affordances which can be exploited in different ways, and they're also tactile. So I think that's kind of what really spoke to me about starting to work with analog tape. And so I had this like, yeah, just lovely experience of slowly finding out about musique concrète as a practice and experimenting myself with musique concrète, and then also simultaneously learning about the kind of historical practice of musique concrète and how it came about in the sort of 40s and 50s.
Oh, that's cool. I wanted to add questions that in the meantime you were talking, but you were keeping answering them. But did you find can I add a question in between?
Yeah,
about what you just say? If you talked at the end of tape recorders that what's your favorite playful way of manipulating sound? But have you found a specific type of microphone that you, or do you use the tape recorders microphones, and or do you take them out? Do do you play with the setup of the microphones, or because you know we're always talk about the VX mic, but I wanted to know if you went in this way or not.
Yeah, I'd say I have a pretty unholy approach when it comes to sound fidelity and microphones. So yeah, often I'll just record straight through whatever sort of internal mic the tape recorder has, which has its own characteristics and quirks and all sorts. But I was also lucky enough to find an old Zoom recorder on the street outside Goldsmiths. So someone must have been using it to record lectures, and they moved house and they just left it boxed, like
Perfect.
Next to the bins. So that's what I use. Like I say, cheap, accessible. It does the job for me. I'll run the sound. So I'll have that mic plugged in as an external mic to the tape recorder. So it's still recording directly to tape. But I've found that it's not quite as crunchy as the internal mic of the tape recorder. And yeah, one thing that's good is playing around with, some of them have like 3-band EQs, and often that can be quite nice for shaping the sound a little bit as well. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Ben. I'll jump at the next question. How has the concept of acoustemology informed your research approach?
Yeah, I'll jump in with that one. Hey, I just want to check quickly, Indy, if you're there. We're over an hour, so I just want to do a little time check with you and check that you're okay to
So
keep rolling.
we normally tied up an hour and a half max. So
cool, perfect. We're on track then.
Yeah, so thank you.
Good, thanks, Indy. Yeah, I just wanted to double check. Good, yeah, so acoustemology, that was kind of the first, I suppose, like sound theory word that I was directed to try and get my head around what I was up to when I was making these recordings. Because like I say, like, and Max, I think you reflected this, like practice and theory are very much intertwined, and it's sometimes hard to work out which one's coming first. Like, you don't necessarily have your whole theoretical framework and then you go out and execute it in the practice. It's like a little bit of theory, a little bit of practice, and then the theory comes along and informs the practice again, and it builds like that. So I'd been making these recordings, and then I found out about this concept of acoustemology that I found reasonably useful, and I think I'll try and put it to work in my write-up. So acoustemology was coined by the anthropologist Stephen Feld. He did field work in the rainforest in Papua New Guinea. So this environment is like a very dense jungle. And what he found was that the people who were living there, they kind of, the world for them was known through sound, right? So if you have a very dense jungle and you can only see a few meters in front of you, the kind of spatial locations of things around you make themselves known through sound before they make themselves known visually. So acoustemology essentially conjoins acoustics on the one hand and epistemology on the other hand to explore how we come to know the world through sounding and listening practices. So yeah, I mean, there's a few things that I find useful about acoustemology, but the main one is that there's a big emphasis on relationality. So this is not a study of sound as a scientific object, like you might study it in acoustics. It's not just a kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, like a pure sort of positivistic study of sound as a vibration in a material. It's studying sound as it's actually heard and experienced by the person who's perceiving it, if that makes sense. So the way that I suppose I've used that in my own research is in some ways I'm asking what happens when we start with sound as the grounds for our inquiry or exploration into what skateboarding actually is. What happens if we make sound the basis for that and sort of build up from there? So yeah, that's acoustemology.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, I never heard about that before, and I'm curious to see you develop that in your thesis afterwards. Next question is, how has the practice and theory of musique concrète informed your research? So you gave us some hints of it, and I'm curious to hear from you about that.
Yeah, this bit's good because this is my opportunity to bungle some French pronunciations. So with a native French speaker listening. So yeah, so I learned, like I say, I learned about musique concrète sort of after starting to experiment with tape recorders. So I'd done some experiments, and I was starting to play around with recording and manipulating sound using cassette players, like you saw in the video earlier. And then as that was ongoing, I started to read more about this practice of musique concrète. So essentially, musique concrète is a practice which makes use of recorded sounds, so concrete sounds, as the basis for musical composition. So I think in today's kind of sonic world of sampling and recording and all sorts, it can seem a little bit I suppose obvious maybe, but I think when you learn about the history, it's just amazing to think about just how radical this sort of idea was back when it was first sort of incubated. So it's got a history which is entwined with the development of different types of recording technologies. So you're looking at the kind of various developments in vinyl records and gramophone technologies, and also in magnetic tape as a sort of medium for capturing and portraying sound. And also actually wire recorders, which I've not had a chance to mess around with, but they are fascinating things. They're like these like thin magnetic wires, and I think they preceded magnetic tape. But they were kind of hard to edit because I think you had to tie, it's almost like fishing line. And I think if you wanted to stick two bits together, you had to like make a knot. So there would be a little bump as you were kind of playing it, but it records sonic information in the same way that tape does, which is through sort of, kind of magnetic changes. So yes, so this practice of musique concrète, it was kind of developed by this guy, Pierre Schaeffer, who was a telecommunications engineer at Radio Diffusion Nationale, which, interestingly enough, I think was involved with some of the early broadcasts from liberated Paris. So they were kind of connected with the resistance movement there. So the engineers who were working on this kind of new mode of music throughout the 40s and 50s were in some ways, I don't know, exploring the sort of post-war landscape of both sort of urbanization and mechanization. So you had these cities which were suddenly sort of flooded even more heavily with the sounds of things like trains and cars and factories and so on. So in some ways, I think musique concrète is an exploration of this simultaneous sort of movement that you have where suddenly you can capture recorded sounds and you can play them back in a context which is separate from their actual sound source. And also with the kind of rapid technological changes which are affecting our cities at the same time, right? So yeah, they started to capture these sounds, firstly on records, but then on tape. And then they would experiment with ways that they could manipulate those sounds through the recording mediums. So this would primarily at first have been through looping, through making a fixed, like a locked loop groove in a record where the needle would sort of skip back every time. So you end up just with the same thing repeating. And then they would move on to loop tape, make tape loops and loop tape in the same sort of way. This is kind of interesting to me because that is arguably more of a psychological effect than a technological one. So the sound, when it's looped, the sound itself doesn't actually change, but the perception of the listener on hearing the sound changes because it's being played again and again and again. And I think that's kind of interesting. But then they did move on to explore some other methods where they're doing things like reversing the sound. they're slowing it down, they're speeding it up. They had an amazing engineer called Jacques Poulin, who innovated machines like the phonogene and the morphophone, which I mean, they're just crazy. And when you look at pictures of these guys when they were kind of doing their early research, it looks like they're trying to like crack the secrets of time travel or something. Like they're all in lab coats and they've got these huge machines all around them. And I mean, like some of these machines, they're crazy. Like they could do like real-time pitch shifting of recorded bits of sound. So they could actually make the pitch lower, but keep the speed of the playback the same, which wasn't really perfected until sort of like digital sampling methods. But they made this crazy like rotating tape head, just like mechanism that somehow did it. So as you can probably guess, so basically they're playing with the spatiality, the temporality, and the timbre of recorded sounds. And as you can probably guess, like their techniques, they went on to influence all sorts of countercultural music sort of genres. So these techniques, things like delay, reverb, looping, sampling, all of them inform things like dub reggae, jungle, techno, hip hop, you know, so really like a lot of those methods are at the core of lots of different scenes. But then also, in addition to the technological methods that they were developing, Schaefer developed a huge body of sort of theoretical ideas, which complemented his practice of musique concrète. So he has this term called the acousmatic, which I'm kind of putting to work in my own research. The acousmatic is borrowed from this kind of myth about Pythagoras, followers of Pythagoras being called the acousmatikoi, because they would listen to Pythagoras from behind a curtain. So they couldn't see him, they could only hear the words that he was saying. And the idea behind that is that would mean that they would focus on the message, the content of the words, rather than the person who was delivering them. So that's reflected in Schaefer's removal of skate sound, of sound in general, of Schaefer's removal of sound from its context. So you can't see the sound source anymore. You get to experience the sound in itself to some degree. So acousmatic in Schaefer's definition is just a sound whose source cannot be seen. So in this way, Schaefer's borrowing from the phenomenological, that's a tough one. Schaefer's borrowing from the phenomenological tradition, and he's suggesting that by removing the referent or the source of a sound, there's a way that we can experience the sound on its own terms, the sound in itself. So this is reflected in the phenomenological reduction, where the idea is that we sort of bracket our taken for granted judgments about the external world, and we try to focus on the experience of perceiving it specifically. In terms of how that's been useful to my own practice, this is not just sort of in terms of the physical methods that I discussed earlier, although they've been very informative and very, you know, exciting to play with, but also the theory of the acousmatic. So what I've kind of done is experimented with varying degrees of decontextualization of skate sound. So presenting skate sound to people in situations where they might not even know that it's skate sound, in ways where it's been manipulated in different ways, and starting to gather their reactions to the sound in itself, if there is such a thing. So in this way, I can sort of explore the difference between sound and noise to some level, and maybe the extent to which people's responses to skate sound are conditioned by their sort of learned experience or their associations with the source of skate sound.
But for example, someone who doesn't know anything about skate sculptures, how do they respond to this isolated sound of skateboarding?
Yeah, so that's a funny one. Let's see. I think, yeah, I mean, I can touch on that I'll drop it in now. So it's funny. So the most common topic, the most common feedback that I've had about people who don't realize that it's skate sound and who are hearing some sort of affected version of skate sound is that they say that it is very relaxing, that it's I don't know, it makes them feel, yeah, sort of like whale song, or like it's calming, or like ASMR, like yeah.
Oh, we don't expect that.
Yeah.
So what last 15
Sorry.
minutes?
Okay. Shall I? Yeah, I'll jump on the next question. I imagine the answer to this question will derive from a question, the last two questions. But in the skate arts practice, I've mapped my thesis. I'm referring to skate loops experiments, that kind of installations essay. What's the devenir of this? Do you plan on exposing them if you had space or invitations or any budget? What would you do with that?
Yeah, well, I can save a bit of time on this one because the answer is that I'm not really sure. I think the idea of a bigger exhibition and of taking over a room with some larger tape loops is kind of natural. Like the sculptures lend themselves to that to some degree. But at the moment, in terms of time, resources, finances, all of those things, I'm not so focused on making new work right now. But because of the time constraints of the PhD, I'm kind of working with the material that I've got. So yeah.
I know your feeling. I really know your feeling. But maybe you know this artist, Silvinas Kempinas, who's doing major sculpture installation that takes a whole space with magnetic bands. I'll drop you the name, but I imagine a skate loop experiment with this kind of sculpture that would be insane, really insane.
Yeah.
I'll drop it. It's beautiful as well. What conclusion, if any, have you arrived at through your experiments? And I think you just gave us some hints before.
Yeah. So I'll cruise through this because I think it will be nice to get some to speak to some people and have some Q&A time. So my conclusions are tentative right now because I'm still in the writing up phase. I think it's interesting that non-skaters seem to find skate sound relaxing when it's out of context. This could maybe to some degree answer some of the questions that are posed in your skate sound plurality paper, in terms of thinking about that subjectivism and the other different categorizations that you have about what it is that conditions people's response to skate sound. So I think there's something to be said there. Let me see. I'll skip to some of my more fun and less thought out conclusions. So there's this really interesting experiment that someone's done with organ music, and you might have heard of it, about infrasound. So they did an experiment where they played like church music without any. So infrasound is sound which is so low, the frequencies, that we can't hear them. So they did one performance where they played the organ and there was no infrasound. And then they did another performance where they played it with infrasound. And they found that more people who had been subjected to the infrasound, so the low frequencies, experienced some sort of religious or spiritual kind of experience. And it's also been connected with things like hauntings or like experiences of the paranormal. So I'm interested in the idea that maybe the skater's body, through being exposed to the vibrations as well as the sound, that's kind of one of the things that makes skateboarding so appealing to the practitioner. So that would link back to some of Paul O'Connor's work. So that's one fun little idea that people are free to run with. And then I'm also keen to build on Vivoni's idea of scuff. So Vivoni has this paper where he's talking about the layers of accretion and erosion, which are visible in public skate spaces. And he says that they're political insofar as they are visual markers of that transformation of capitalist space into playful, non-productive space. And currently right now, I'm writing up about this idea that noise can be understood as a sort of sonic scuff. So noise speaks to that friction, which is embodied by skaters in terms of the sensory experience of skateboarding, but also in terms of their interactions with systems of urban governance, basically. So I'm interested in this idea that noise is sonic scuff. I'll end it there.
I don't know what I never encountered the term scuff. Or can you tell me what does
scuff
that
is like if something's marked, like your shoes, like where you ollie, like they'll be scuffed.
yeah.
So yeah, it's like this idea that there's like visual
Like
markers, friction.
eroded.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have maybe 10 minutes, so I'm gonna ask if anyone has any questions. Maybe Sandra is keen, or Sandra's just
Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Indy. That's awesome.
Is there any questions? Otherwise, Tom has a question. Yep.
I can ask this. Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, those talks were brilliant. I had a question on how the haptic feedback kind of lingers in you as a skateboarder, so that when you're just walking around the city and you don't have your board, but as you kind of walk across different surfaces, does that kind of molecular reaction that you were talking about before occur, so that you feel as if you're skating it?
To who is the question you're addressing? To both of us?
Probably more to you. Well, to both. But I think your work on texturologies, Max, and that kind of that idea of haptic feedback, I think was super interesting.
Thank you very much for the question. I cannot walk in the city without after having been done with all this research. I can't walk in the city without seeing everything with the sound of skateboarding. And to feel it, and it all depends with the shoes I have, because my skate shoes are cup soles, so it's you feel less, but it's stiffer. But sometimes I wear different kind of shoes. But yeah, I like to feel what I have under my feet, and that give me information of and reassure myself that what I feel is what I would have heard in skateboarding. But that's also a good point, because I've been starting to do trail runnings since a few months, and I have the same feeling in the tracks in the forest, like between the roots and the rocks, and it reminds me of the richness of the city, but into the nature. And this is maybe a path I'm gonna take at some point, but to try to transpose everything that I did here and try in giving them in some places else. But yeah, the haptic is something really important, and that yeah, I cannot separate myself from feeling and this haptic sensation.
Thank you very much.
A pleasure.
Ben, did you want to respond to that? Otherwise, we'll move on to Dan, who has a question. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks so much, both of you, and congratulations for where you're up to in your research. It's a very exciting point. So I don't have so much questions, but more just a couple of points that I noticed and really enjoyed in the presentations. So Max, I really enjoyed the vision of the camera close to the ground, and when you rolled over a grate, when we expected to hear a loud noise from the grate, just the act of having to take the weight off the board to be able to roll over it means that suddenly there's silence when you expect a loud noise. So it's kind of like a negative kind of effect, if that makes sense. And Ben, it was really great hearing about recording the sounds and listening to them out of context. So when I was doing my own PhD research, I did a lot of skate park audio recordings as a way to add another layer of memory to a place, knowing that I probably wouldn't go back to them. And when I was doing my write-up, similar to where you're up at now, Ben, I really leaned heavily on the information that came from those audio recordings. So even though most of my research was photographic based, it surprised me how rich the audio material was, even though I didn't necessarily speak much about it in my PhD. But I think in the future it would be good to have a conversation with either one of you about how I might be able to make use of these audio recordings, because they're sitting there doing nothing, but to me they mean a lot. And I know that Brian's listened to them, and we've started working on an idea around them, but it's kind of been shelved. But really nice to hear this information. Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Dan. Sanders just saying goodbye, because we've got maybe 4 minutes left, because it's just such an amazing talk. I'm going to be thinking about this for a very long time after, and I can't wait to watch the recording many times as well. Harry, you had a question.
Yeah, and conscious of time, I mean, initially, like, loved both your talks, and was really good to see more of your work, Max, as well, because I'd seen sort of bits of it, but being properly shown it was really nice. And Ben, obviously been following what you've been doing really excitedly. The thing that struck me with both of your projects, and you both spoke about it in different ways really well, but was the ability for the work you're doing to connect with non-skateboard audiences in particular in a sort of art context, which I think is a sort of recurring barrier sometimes, isn't it, with whether it's sort of skatable sculptures or skate participatory things. So there was something really interesting about, one, creating that sort of accessibility of experience of what skateboarding is. And I guess this raises the question of, well, what is the experience of skateboarding? And I think that everything to do with sort of texture, sound, sort of haptic experience is so crucial to it. But I just would love to hear more, if you both have time, just sort of extended maybe from conversations or feedback or extra thoughts that have come from engaging like audience members who are coming to it not as skateboarders, and how they're engaging with the work.
Yeah, sure. Do you want to start, Ben, or?
Yeah, I can jump in quickly, because I'm sure you've got some reflections too. But yeah, so I mean, one thing that's fun for me is, okay, so firstly, there's the showing skate sound recordings to non-skaters, which initially a lot of my project was, I was thinking in those terms where it's like, maybe if I can give them a positive experience of those sounds, then they'll sort of be, I don't know, somehow converted, and then everybody's going to love skate sound. It's a little bit reductive, but that's kind of one idea in the vein of sort of translating this experience of skate sound to people who don't skateboard. And I don't know, my work's not massively progressed. Maybe it's done that for some people, but it's not progressed in that direction. But the really interesting thing for me has actually been the times when I've managed to decontextualize skate sound for skaters. So to give them like a whole new, like, weird listening experience where they're like, oh yeah, this is the sound that I know, but it's like, it's kind of not as well. Like, skaters seem to respond particularly well to like slowed down skate sound. So I think maybe that's something to do with like the actual embodied experience of skateboarding, and our perception of time sort of changes when we're in that. So yeah, decontextualizing not just for non-skaters, but for skaters too. And then Max, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Harry, for the question, because I've been having different kinds of feedback from my installations, and just to, like you said a bit, Ben, the context of what we're doing is not skate related; it's academia related. So we are around people that in my university there's no skaters. Professors, so I was kind of alone in my medium, and so I had to develop my ideas and give them hints to be interested in what I did. And for example, at first, the first prototype of my installation, was different. It was all the time the skate sounds. I did not have any tactile transducer at time, and it was only big basses, but very, very loud basses. And this made the installation very, very hard to receive, like undigestible. And so I had to work with that, and I came at the end after many attempts to what you saw. And so it was at first presented at non-skaters, and for the people who didn't know skateboarding, it was a good opportunity to discover in another way skate sound without the context and political context of the city, but in an artistic context in which you enter in an art space. You know that you're here to experience something, and this had an effect on the skate sound. And I know that some people afterward, and I talked to some of them after being in my exhibition, and some, like I answered to Tom, can see and understand the textures and the pattern of the city in a different way. I know that some people will see at the pavement lines in a different term. And also it can have I heard at some point in the last iteration of my work, a person that been standing on the haptic floor for like 10 minutes. So it's a lot in the context of an art exhibition. And he got to me afterward and he said, yeah, you know, I'm ADHD, and I think this is a kind of a therapeutic process to me. So it had slowed his activities, and he experienced the work in another way of normal people do. So there's many way of engaging with the public, and I know that there's so many way to understand it, but most of them understood the experience. But some of the people didn't really like the skate sound, and they didn't want to have anything to do with it, and that's part of life, you know.
Great, thank you both.
Pleasure.
Okay, well, we've reached 10:33, so 3 minutes past the time that we planned. And it has been an absolute pleasure to hear about this research, just like Harry and Dan and Tom and Ying and everybody else that was here that had to leave early. I have been absolutely fascinated by both your research and not being able to catch your talks necessarily, Ben, in San Diego. And you know, for you, Max, it's I'm really happy that we hopefully recorded this. So just to wrap up, the SHRED talks are on every month. Sometimes we have maybe 1 or 2 speakers. Sometimes it's a conversation. It could be a round table. It can be a traditional presentation as well. But we are yeah, racking up a lot of talks. It's almost the end of the year. It happened very fast. And it's just wonderful that sometimes when I turn on the screen, people have gone from PhD student to doctor. So it's really, really exciting that we have this family of scholars that are just constantly progressing their work and doing amazing things. I did want to mention Danny Abu-Awa's work. I'm really interested in finding out more about the LA Skate Allyship project that she did as well. And that, yeah, sound has, there's the joy of skating in sound, but I think for women and maybe more vulnerable skaters, sound is also like a way to keep yourself safe. I only wear one earphone when I skate. I don't wear both. And it's not because I'm necessarily worried about crashing into somebody else, although I'm conscious of that. I'm also, for my safety, concentrating on, yeah, what's around me as well. And I think Danny's work did some really interesting thematic work around that as well. So great conversations ahead. Okay, I'm going to thank everybody for attending and wish you a good morning, good afternoon, and good night from Australia. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I can add, if anyone wants to throw questions,